Chapter 30 of Lord Jim by Joseph Conrad. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Read by Peter Dan. Chapter 30. He told me further that he didn't know what made him hang on, but of course we may guess. He sympathised deeply with the defenceless girl at the mercy of that mean, cowardly scoundrel. It appears Cornelius led her an awful life, stopping only short of actual ill usage, for which he had not the pluck, I suppose. He insisted upon her calling him father, and with respect too, with respect, he would scream, shaking a little yellow fist in her face. I am a respectable man, and what are you? Tell me, what are you? You think I am going to bring up somebody else's child and not be treated with respect? You ought to be glad I let you. Come, say, yes, father. No? You wait a bit. Thereupon he would begin to abuse the dead woman, till the girl would run off with her hands to her head. He pursued her, dashing in and out and round the house and amongst the sheds, would drive her into some corner, where she would fall on her knees, stopping her ears, and then he would stand at a distance and declaim filthy denunciations at her back for half an hour at a stretch. Your mother was a devil, a deceitful devil, and you too are a devil, he would shriek in a final outburst, pick up a bit of dry earth or a handful of mud, there was plenty of mud around the house, and fling it into her hair. Sometimes, though, she would hold out, full of scorn, confronting him in silence, her face sombre and contracted, and only now and then uttering a word or two that would make the other jump and writhe with the sting. Jim told me these scenes were terrible. It was indeed a strange thing to come upon in a wilderness. The endlessness of such a subtly cruel situation was appalling, if you think of it. The respectable Cornelius, Inchinalius the Malays called him, with a grimace that meant many things, was a much disappointed man. I don't know what he had expected would be done for him in consideration of his marriage, but evidently the liberty to steal and embezzle and appropriate to himself for many years, and in any way that suited him best, the goods of Stein's trading company — Stein kept the supply up unfalteringly as long as he could get his skippers to take it there — did not seem to him a fair equivalent for the sacrifice of his honourable name. Jim would have enjoyed exceedingly thrashing Cornelius within an inch of his life. On the other hand, the scenes were of so painful a character, so abominable, that his impulse would be to get out of earshot in order to spare the girl's feelings. They left her agitated, speechless, clutching her bosom now and then with a stony, desperate face, and then Jim would lounge up and say unhappily, Now, come, really, what's the use? You must try to eat a bit, or give some such mark of sympathy. Cornelius would keep on slinking through the doorways, across the veranda and back again, as mute as a fish, and with malevolent, mistrustful, underhand glances. I can stop his game, Jim said to her once. Just say the word. And do you know what she answered? She said, Jim told me impressively, that if she had not been sure he was intensely wretched himself, she would have found the courage to kill him with her own hands. Just fancy that, the poor devil of a girl, almost a child, being driven to talk like that, he exclaimed in horror. It seemed impossible to save her, not only from that mean rascal, but even from herself. It wasn't that he pitied her so much, he affirmed. It was more than pity. It was as if he had something on his conscience while that life went on. To leave the house would have appeared a base desertion. He had understood at last that there was nothing to expect from a longer stay, neither accounts nor money nor truth of any sort. But he stayed on, exasperating Cornelius to the verge, I won't say of insanity, but almost of courage. Meantime he felt all sorts of dangers gathering obscurely about him. Doraman had sent over twice a trusty servant to tell him seriously that he could do nothing for his safety unless he would recross the river again and live amongst the bogies as at first. People of every condition used to call, often in the dead of night, in order to disclose to him plots for his assassination. He was to be poisoned. He was to be stabbed in the bath-house. Arrangements were being made to have him shot from a boat on the river. Each of these informants professed himself to be his very good friend. It was enough, he told me, to spoil a fellow's rest for ever. Something of the kind was extremely possible, nay, probable, but the lying warnings gave him only the sense of deadly scheming going on all around him, on all sides, in the dark. Nothing more calculated to shake the best of nerve. Finally, one night, Cornelius himself, with a great apparatus of alarm and secrecy, unfolded in solemn, wheedling tones a little plan wherein for $100, or even for 80, let's say 80, he, Cornelius, would procure a trustworthy man to smuggle Jim out of the river, all safe. There was nothing else for it now, if Jim cared a pin for his life. What's $80? A trifle. An insignificant sum, while he, Cornelius, who had to remain behind, was absolutely courting death by this proof of devotion to Mr. Stein's young friend. The sight of his abject grimacing was, Jim told me, very hard to bear. He clutched at his hair, beat his breast, rocked himself to and fro with his hands pressed to his stomach, and actually pretended to shed tears. "Your blood be on your own head," he squeaked at last, and rushed out. It is a curious question how far Cornelius was sincere in that performance. Jim confessed to me that he did not sleep a wink after the fellow had gone. He lay on his back on a thin mat spread over the bamboo flooring, trying idly to make out the bare rafters and listening to the rustlings in the torn thatch. A star suddenly twinkled through a hole in the roof. His brain was in a whirl, but nevertheless it was on that very night that he matured his plan for overcoming Sheriff Ali. It had been the thought of all the moments he could spare from the hopeless investigation into Stein's affairs, but the notion, he says, came to him then all at once. He could see, as it were, the guns mounted on top of the hill. He got very hot and excited lying there. Sleep was out of the question more than ever. He jumped up and went out barefooted on the veranda. Walking silently, he came upon the girl, motionless against the wall, as if on the watch. In his then state of mind, it did not surprise him to see her up, nor yet to hear her ask in an anxious whisper where Cornelius could be. He simply said he did not know. She moaned a little and peered into the campong. Everything was very quiet. He was possessed by his new idea, and so full of it that he could not help telling the girl all about it at once. She listened, clapped her hands lightly, whispered softly her admiration, but was evidently on the alert all the time. It seems he had been used to make a confidant of her all along, and that she, on her part, could and did give him a lot of useful hints as to partisan affairs, there is no doubt. He assured me more than once that he had never found himself the worse for her advice. At any rate, he was proceeding to explain his plan fully to her there and then, when she pressed his arm once and vanished from his side. Then Cornelius appeared from somewhere, and perceiving Jim, ducked sideways as though he had been shot at, and afterwards stood very still in the dusk. At last he came forward prudently, like a suspicious cat. "There were some fishermen there with fish," he said in a shaky voice. "To sell fish, you understand." It must have been then 2 o'clock in the morning, a likely time for anybody to hawk fish about. Jim, however, let the statement pass, and did not give it a single thought. Other matters occupied his mind, and besides he had neither seen nor heard anything. He contented himself by saying "oh" absently, got a drink of water out of a pitcher standing there, and, leaving Cornelius a prey to some inexplicable emotion that made him embrace with both arms the worm-eaten rail of the veranda as if his legs had failed, went in again and lay down on his mat to think. By and by he heard stealthy footsteps. They stopped. A voice whispered tremulously through the wall, "Are you asleep?" "No, what is it?" he answered briskly, and there was an abrupt movement outside, and then all was still, as if the whisperer had been startled. Extremely annoyed at this, Jim came out impetuously, and Cornelius, with a faint shriek, fled along the veranda as far as the steps, where he hung on to the broken banister. Very puzzled, Jim called out to him from the distance to know what the devil he meant. "Have you given consideration to what I spoke to you about?" asked Cornelius, pronouncing the words with difficulty, like a man in a cold fit of a fever. "No," shouted Jim in a passion, "I have not, and I don't intend to. I'm going to live here in Patusan." "You shall die here," answered Cornelius, still shaking violently and in a sort of expiring voice. The whole performance was so absurd and provoking that Jim didn't know whether he ought to be amused or angry. "Not till I have you tucked away, you bet," he called out, exasperated, yet ready to laugh. Half seriously, being excited with his own thoughts, he went on shouting, "Nothing can touch me. You can do your damnedest." Somehow the shadowy Cornelius far off there seemed to be the hateful embodiment of all the annoyances and difficulties he had found in his path. He let himself go. His nerves had been overwrought for days, and called him many pretty names: swindler, liar, sorry rascal. In fact, carried on in an extraordinary way. He admits he passed all bounds, that he was quite beside himself, defied all partisan to scare him away, declared he would make them all dance to his own tune yet, and so on, in a menacing, boasting strain. Perfectly bombastic and ridiculous, he said. His ears burned at the bare recollection. Must have been off his chump in some way. The girl who was sitting with us nodded her little head at me quickly, frowned faintly, and said, "I heard him," with childlike solemnity. He laughed and blushed. What stopped him at last, he said, was the silence, the complete death-like silence of the indistinct figure far over there, that seemed to hang collapsed, doubled over the rail in a weird immobility. He came to his senses, and, ceasing suddenly, wondered greatly at himself. He watched for a while. Not a stir, not a sound. Exactly as if the chap had died while I had been making all that noise, he said. He was so ashamed of himself that he went indoors in a hurry without another word, and flung himself down again. The row seemed to have done him good, though, because he went to sleep for the rest of the night like a baby. Hadn't slept like that for weeks. "But I didn't sleep," struck in the girl, one elbow on the table and nursing her cheek. "I watched." Her big eyes flashed, rolling a little, and then she fixed them on my face intently. End of chapter 30.